So we're recording now. The second thing around the protocols is that we always start with a couple of slides that talk through the culture of this group on today, and then we look at the peak performance indicator. And unfortunately, my computer, being away, isn't connecting to my Box account to be able to pull things in off the cloud. So I don't have the deck that I prepared for today, but I know it sort of off the top of my head. But essentially, I'll start with what our normal protocols are, and then we'll go into talking about the authenticate and the complete drives, which we didn't really get to spend much time on last week. And this is all about relationships. Just before I start, does anyone have any news or anything, any comments, questions they want to share, particularly if there's anything you want to make sure we cover during this next hour or so?
Hey, Paul, it's Grant. How you going?
Hey, Grant. Really good.
Good. I just want to share, this has been a real, I always talk about ID whenever I catch up with Greg and Richard as being like putting the jumper leads on my battery. And I feel like these weekly deep dives have just given me a new lease of life with conversations that I've not only been able to have from a work perspective, but just family perspective that I've shared previously. You know, my son just did his ID recently with Greg and Richard, and it's just given us a much deeper and richer level of conversation that we can have that start to go into some of the technical aspects of his particular ID profile and how we work together as a father and son and all the rest of it. So I just want to really acknowledge you for these weekly catch-ups. And for me, I feel like it's a massive investment in myself personally, but then it obviously plays out in my family and work environment. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thanks, Grant. It's really good to hear. I should have asked if anyone, because we share a lot each week, whether anyone has any updates, from actually going away and applying anything that they've learned. I can tell you for me, thanks, Kylie, I can tell you that for me, there's a lot of that I'm learning as well. This isn't all a one-way street, I can assure you, and it's energizing for me. But a lot of the nuances, I think I love putting them on. And for those who are new, the genesis of these came from the start of COVID. And I just thought, what can we do as a team to help people stay true to themselves and on track with being in stride and being at their very best through what clearly was set to be a pretty trying time. And the longer it goes on, the more challenging that's proving to be for various people. So I think the need to be self-aware and to know how to stay in stride and be your best and to help others be the best around you is really critical, especially in your family, as Grant's just alluding to. So if any of you haven't yet done the idea of your spouse or of a child that could make a difference, please take advantage of that, because that's one of the smartest things I think you could do. But excuse me, a lot of the value is coming from the sharing. For me personally, the nuances that some of you share around stories about your drive or perspectives that you have, they're subtle, but they're so valuable, and I'm learning a ton. It's been fantastic. So to all of you as well who have been real regulars on these calls, you're making a difference to everybody else too, not just yourself.
Paul, I just want to talk about last week, and I know it's probably an improvised thing. You think about it after the thing's finished. You were asking about each drive to say what are they in awe about of the other direction.
Yep.
I wonder if we should add in the 5, because it really threw me, no drive in verify, and thinking, I'm in awe of both directions because to me, it's my other drives that produce behavior that might look like it's a verify thing. So I just wonder if in today's session or whatever, that's another wrinkle to add in, the people that got no drive. Because I think over the years I've found that can be a bit of a blind spot for people because they don't have it as an innate drive one direction or the other.
That's a great call out, Richard. I'm sure we could learn a lot from that too. So I think that it may not fit today. I mean, if anyone's got in there they want to share off the cuff, that's fine. But I think it might be really smart to do a separate session on 5s, actually. There's a lot that I think could come out of that. So that's a great suggestion. All right. So if I'm cutting anyone off, please just chime in as it suits you along the way. But thanks for all of those initial comments as well, guys. That's really great energy to start the call. I'm not in my office today, as you can probably tell. I'm actually away. I'm having a couple of days out with my family, but I didn't want to interfere with the momentum of these webinars. So I'm here sitting in the snow in my car with the engine running, so I can do the webinar. I figured as long as I've got a voice and a little bit of visual, we can probably still make a difference today. So let's get on with the show. So in terms of peak performance indicator and whether or not you're in stride today, I want you just to stop and reflect on where, what sort of day and week are you having, and on a scale of 0 to 10, what number's coming up for you today? Anywhere from probably 1 to 10 will be where everyone falls. And, you want to be anywhere from an 8 above, ideally, to be in a place where you're sending out a really positive shadow and influence on the people around you. So just think about what that number is for you. And if it is high, also, what are you doing to get it up there? Are there particular things that work for you that you need to do consistently to stay really strong? Or if it's down, is there something that's not happening that you can also be aware of? I at least know what it is. I think the worst thing, whether you've got a great score of, an 8, 9, or 10, or a low score, but one of the hardest things is when you don't actually know why it's the way it is, So that's one thing I was going to have you think about. And then the second I thought about today, given the topic is about relationships, I thought it might be interesting to just think about, and where's your relationship at? Whether it's, your relationship with your life partner, or whether it's a relationship with one of your kids, as Grant was saying before, where, think about someone that's really on your mind at the moment. And it could be outside of your immediate family. It could be, a sibling or a work colleague, but someone that you really need to connect with. And if you were to put the PPI on that relationship, what's the score that you would have? And if that score isn't an 8, 9, or 10, what do you need to do to help it get there? That might be something worth reflecting on as we go through the webinar today. Because you can apply the peak performance indicator, not just to yourself individually. You can look at that, you can break it down individually in your own life. You can say, what's my score when it comes to my fitness? What's my score when it comes to my relationship? What's my score when it comes to...
The only sad thing that I did here today was that 20% theater closed.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Yes. So...
Harry,
oops, sorry.
Can you just go on mute, please? There you go. Great to see that at least one of us can multitask. Not my talent. All right, so you can break it down is what I was saying. So you can look at it across, like if, in my case with the kids, I could look at each child and say, what's my number with each one of those relationships? And at various times, one child could be an 8, another could be a 4 for whatever reason. And so what are you doing to keep the 8 high, and what are you doing to try and course correct on the 4, so many different ways you can use the peak performance indicator. We've done it with teams where we do it on the team. We do it individually throughout the team, and then we do it collectively on the team. And then we can even look at things like the culture of an organization and say, well, what number would we give the culture, and what do we need to do to shift that? So you can apply that little model and tool in a lot of different ways, but think of it today in relation to the closest relationships that are on your mind. Does anyone have anything they want to share about the number that's come up for them? Firstly, about themselves, and what their number is and why it is the way it is, and or something that's come up for you about a relationship. Please, if you want to share, remember you might be on mute. You might have to just take yourself off mute first. Okay, let's keep moving. You don't have to share. We can just keep moving. So last week we did a deeper dive on firstly the Verify drive, and talked about what are people in awe of, either about what they see themselves bringing to a relationship that they're really proud of, or when they look at someone who's got the opposite drive to them. So if you're a verifier, when you look at an avoid verifier, or likewise when you're an avoid verifier looking at a verifier, what do you see? And it was really insightful to hear what people had to share. And then we flicked over to the improvise drive, because we had a lot of people on the call that were avoid improvise. And so we covered the avoid improvise pretty well. We didn't spend a lot of time on the improvise drive. We covered a few things on it, but if anyone's got anything that they've particularly observed in the last week about the improvise drive they'd like to call out, that they're in awe of about that drive, let's just quickly start there, and we'll move on to the authenticate drive and then the complete drive today. So when you think about the improvised drive, is there anything new that someone maybe has experienced in the last week that stands out to them they'd like to share? Please don't be shy, because what you share could be making a real difference for somebody else.
Yes, well, for me, Paul,
Hey, Doug.
Good, well, indeed. For me, it's the energy they bring to a situation always. And it's an energy not just bouncing off the walls. It's not a stimulus energy. It's really a deep down simplicity and positiveness, which balances my sort of risk management nonsense, you know?
Thank you, Doug. That's good. And it's good the nuance you said. It's not necessarily the animated, passionate, excited person. It can just be that positivity of wanting to always take things forward, or how they simplify things so that things can keep moving forward. Just that is positive energy. Yeah, thank you. Pam, I think you're going to share something, were you?
Yeah, so what I was going to share is both my daughter-in-laws are avoid improvisers, and they're nurses. So they fall into that calm category. And what I've come to realize in doing this, when we talk about how they absorb the pressure around them,
Yeah.
You know, we've got all these things going on in California. There's fires everywhere, power going out, kids not going to school, all these things that are going on in their lives. And I've really been more aware of how much they absorb that pressure around them, and what I can do to help relieve some of that pressure.
Good on you, Pam. I think that's a great point to remind everybody of. We spoke last week about the fact that as this pandemic goes on, the avoid improvisers are the ones that don't make a song and dance about things. They get on with the job. They're low key. Low key was one of the attributes that came up last week, is what people really admire about that drive. But we've learned through these webinars that one of the real traits of that drive is they not only reduce the pressure on other people. One way of reducing pressure is to absorb the pressure. And as they continue to absorb, whilst they absorb it, not all of them have necessarily figured out what's their pressure release valve? What do they do to actually reduce that pressure for themselves? And, you know, it could be as simple as reaching out to them to just say hi and check in and talk about it. For some people, it might be talking about it. For some people, it's exercise. You know, some people might have strategies around meditation or music or a hobby or something like that. So many of them don't, and they're just going from, you know, the pressure to sleep, basically. And there will come a point where it's, you know, it'll break them. And I think we need those people. All of our frontline workers, as I said last week, if we did an ID profile across all of our frontline workers, I have no doubt that it would be probably plus 80% avoid improvise. So one of the things we can do from our community here with ID is to think about the people that are on the front line who probably are avoid improvise, especially if they're in the medical field, or you know, even people frontline in like retail outlets and so on. Those people, so many of them would be avoid improvise and just getting on with the job, but the pressure is building and building. So you could be really instrumental in helping just even show empathy to what they're going through. As we learnt a few weeks back, just that makes a massive difference. Thanks, Ben. Really important call out.
Along that theme, the one thing about the improvised drive is we're quick to get into the drama or the energy of a situation, like, and quick to get out. And when you're working or living with avoid improvise, they don't come out quite so quickly, or they don't go in quite so quickly. And so there's a tendency I've noticed with my wife that I can get into a thing like, what'd you put that there for? And then she's still reeling from the why I had such a reaction to at the top of a lid of a pot, right? And I'm ready to move on. And I don't know that I haven't been. I'm learning a lot lately. I'm more respectful of what she's still bobbing, the water's still popping for her, the ripples are still going. And I think sometimes with the carers you're talking about, is that there will be more going on that we may give attention or time to. And we need to let them let us know it's over, not because we're over it too quick.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you. Can for some of the avoid improvisers on the call that might be sitting there and not normally sharing, could you help us understand what if you were a frontline worker, and maybe you are, but if you were, or you're got your own pressure that you're absorbing from people around you through the pandemic, help us understand some of the nuances that might be going on that aren't so obvious to the rest of us. That would be really helpful, and so that we can better understand those in our lives that are avoid improvise, how we can better then support them.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Amanda.
I just want to share a couple of things recently. So my husband is a 8 for improvise, and I'm a 1, and we work together. And last week we had a couple of situations where we can clearly see, I guess, the differences in our ID. So we have a team working in the Philippines for us, so we outsource there. And last week we had one girl that handing her resignation, and then on the same day we had another girl that was stopped on her way to work by the military because she had high temperature, so she couldn't come into the office. And that for me was like really shocking, like getting on the day and just, oh my God, what we're gonna do? We have 2 people kind of not coming in, and he just makes really quick decisions. And I find that in these situations where I don't have time to think and process the information, and which is how I make decisions, it really works well with him because he was quick to think and absorb the information and just go, right, we're just going to send the computers to their houses and they're just going to work from home. And that's the new norm, and that's it. And I was like, okay. And then the day went by, and at night I was still going, okay, so they're working from home now. Okay, so how does it, and it's just interesting to see that in business, at least, it works well because he can make those decisions really quickly under pressure. Whereas if it's something we have time, then I'll process the information and I'll take my time to make that decision. But in terms of coping, I'm not a frontline worker, so I honestly don't know if I would be able to do it because I would feel a lot of pressure. But I do have pressure in my day-to-day, and what I find works for me really well is just going for walks during the day. So if I feel it's a stressful day, I just leave everything, leave the computer, and I go for a walk around the block.
Okay.
I find that works really well. It releases the pressure. And I also find that I recharge having some time on my own at home. So I like to, yeah, when the day finishes, I like to process the day in my head, and I don't necessarily want to talk to people. I just want to have that time thinking things through, and maybe in my bedroom on my own, and I'll go, right. That's how I find that I cope with stress.
That's awesome. Thanks, Amanda. Could someone else share with us, as an avoid improvise, how powerful is solitude as a means of releasing pressure? That would be really helpful. Now, could someone else share with us, like you've said, like Amanda just said, when you get time on your own, tell us about the effect that has on reducing pressure for you.
Go for it, Brenda.
From my perspective, so twofold, I manage global benefits, right? So as someone who's always in service, from about 5 o'clock in the morning to about 10 o'clock at night, I'm always helping other people, right? And during the pandemic, people are showing up very different than usual because everything is now pronounced, and the polarity of how this impacts people is one way or another, right? So it's like, oh, you should go out with a mask, or, oh no, we need to wear masks, right? There's no middle of the road where it's like, okay, as humans, let's all work together so we can solve this and get it done. Everybody wants to have an opinion on it and do their own thing. So what's showing up is a lot of personal stuff, And so bringing out mental health and those kinds of services for people are very important. For me, how I know I need my personal time for my personal space, I never make plans Friday evenings. Don't ask me to go out on, dinner plans or anything. Sorry, Friday, I am spent. I love you guys, but bye-bye. Right? And it's that shut down. Okay, wait a minute. That's my space, my time. You want the best of me? Let's do anything Saturday or Sunday. All day, any day, right? But just not Friday. Because we've been going, and you hit the wall and you need that time away just to go, okay, put yourself back together. Okay, now I can engage, right? There's so much that you are taking on as a person energetically, and then everybody else's problems. So you need to just go, shh. So, my perspective.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Brenda. And it's good to hear the way you do it, because it gives ideas to others on how they could maybe structure their week similarly to do that, whether it's once, like Friday night, or whether it's a couple of times through the week or day. It will vary from person to person, but that's really good to hear that.
Yeah, and then there was one other thing that you said. So I get up 4:30 every morning just to get my day organized. I read through all my emails first, see what's on fire. Okay, then I go hit the shower, get my coffee, and then I'm, sitting down, and it's like, okay, I can take on the day. Doesn't matter what happens after that point. I know what's happening, and I can go, okay, I can deal with all those fire drills. But if I don't get to the emails, then, oh man, I missed the shit storm that's, 100 emails below. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. I don't know what the priority is of the day.
Okay. So this is, for those of you, you can see Brenda's ID is 5673, and we talk about completers needing time to get settled and get organized. It's normally a little routine. It's probably about a 20-minute routine. It's different for every person, but the completers who are really self-aware know that what that routine is for them to get settled and start their day on the right foot. And so long as they get to do that, their day goes brilliantly. And whether it's for work or whether it's, I've even worked with athletes who will say, I have a little routine I need to do for how I warm up and get ready to play. And if I do that, I play really well. And you know what, when I'm running late or something goes wrong and I don't get to do that, it completely throws my game. I might as well not play, And it's why we often see athletes who are consistently high performers have bad days. When you drill into it and you find, and having worked with them and you see their ID, I mean, it can be as simple as they didn't have that chance to get settled. So we'll talk about that more, I guess, as we get into the complete drive a little later. But thanks for the sharing, Brenda. That's really good insight for all of us.
No, thank you. I am loving this program, so thank you.
You're very welcome. Guys, out of interest to everybody, let's move on to talk about what we are in awe of for the Authenticate Drive. We have actually a really, I think it was something like 70% of the people on the call today are authenticators. So we actually have a lot of people with that drive. And I think, first of all, this can be shared from both angles. This can be authenticators saying, what do they see that they bring to a relationship that they're really proud of and confident about? And secondly, for those of us who are avoid authenticate, what do we see and admire in them? And I'll kick it off, first of all, and then we'll talk about the avoid authenticate drive, and then hopefully we'll have time to get into complete drive. If not, we'll extend that to next week. But let's see where this takes us for the authenticate drive. I don't want to stop anything just to kick on and miss value that could be really wonderful for people with the authenticate drive and avoid authenticate as well. So I'll kick it off for the authenticates. I mean, for me, just the way that they can, the truth, I see, and I'm just talking relationship, the way that they can just say what the truth is, and whether, no matter what it is, and even when it's brutal, you still want to hear it the way they share it, because there's no emotion around it. I mean, even if there is emotion around it from them, the emotion is not at you. It might be emotional for them, but it's just a declaration of the truth. And I love the way they just put it on the table, because that's who they are. They don't shy away from that, no matter how sensitive it is or whether it might hurt. It's like, if that's the truth, that's what we put on the table. And I find it just leads to total honesty, transparency, and a lot of my authenticate relationships have been around for a long time. And I acknowledge, I think, what they bring to the table, because they just keep by them being honest, they keep both of us really honest and, you know, everything out on the table. So to those of you who have that drive and have been in my life that long, thank you. What does anyone else see, or what of the authenticators? What do you guys share?
Paul, what I'd like to say to that is, Peter.
Hey, Peter, welcome.
Thank you. I know you said a very similar thing to me probably 15 years ago, with the hard truths that needs to come out. I want it straight. That is true, but it doesn't mean that your truth is my truth. And that's the only thing I'd say to that. Yes, we want the truth, but it doesn't mean that the truth that other people want to give us, what they think we want so desperately want to hear, it might not be our truth. And we don't want to hear it in that case, you know, so, yeah.
Yes. I think it's a great perspective for authenticators to keep in mind, that they're seeing what's above the surface or what's truth to them, but there could be a lot more behind the scenes that they're not as aware of. Thanks, Peter. Good call out.
Hey, Paul, it's Grant. Yeah, my son that I spoke about has done his ID, and you know, Greg and Richard were the ones that sort of took him through, or took all of us through Jack's profile. He's a 7, and I forget what Mel is. She might be a 6 or something. I'm a 4, and it's interesting. It's almost like putting a mirror in front of myself, talking to my son on a regular basis, in terms of him being an authenticator and me being an avoid authenticator. And what I've realised is that seeing the way he just calls it for what it is, there's no hidden meaning. It's just, it is what it is. One of my frustrations about myself from time to time is that I get caught up trying to look for the meaning between the lines and trying to understand agendas and all the rest of it. And it's actually, I actually learnt a lot about myself by seeing the way he, being so strong and authenticate, and the way he describes things. I'm like, man, I actually wish I had the ability to see and do and respond and talk, describe things the way he does. So that is something I'm really in awe of. And it's not to say that it's a, you know, that I wish I was an authenticator. I am who I am, but it's just, I am in awe of the ability to just, the way they see the world, you know, and how they respond to it, and just keep it, they see it for what it is. And you know, I love that. I love seeing that in my son. I think ever since that session with Greg and Richard, now I really look out for it. When he describes things to me, I really look out for it.
Don't you love that? It's so good when you know that's what it is. You can notice it more, and you can also compliment them more about it. You know, everyone loves being complimented on their strengths.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good on you, Grant.
Can I add to this? It's Gail. I'm 2 in Authenticate, and I will never forget the day my daughter said to me, "Mum, you're so bloody busy looking below the surface, you miss the bleeding obvious." And that is the thing that I admire. I'm always missing the bleeding obvious. I'm saying, what am I missing? Because there's a whole conversation going on around me, and I've got no clue at all what they're talking about, or even why they're talking about it, because I'm here and they're there. And yeah, it's so true. It's such...
Yeah.
Although sometimes it's annoying, it's actually a really, really special thing.
It's really good, Gail. Thank you.
This is Brenda. One of the things that the flip side to that is, not everybody wants the opinion. So you always ask, do you want to hear my perspective? Because sometimes people really don't want to hear it. And rather than waste your breath, you don't need to waste time there. The second thing is, when you are going to give that kind of information, sometimes it's better to lead with, my intention behind this is blah, right? So then that way there's no hurt feelings, because sometimes we're landing the plane in meetings and it's like, okay, we've flown around the airport 6 times. Okay, let's get to the chase, right? People don't like that. They want to touch it. They want to feel it. And it's like, okay, but we got to land the plane sometime, right? So it's like, sometimes for us, it's very frustrating in meetings where it's talked to death. So just a perspective.
Thanks, Brenda. Thank you. So another point that builds on that I'll say that I'm personally in awe of is the way that an authenticator articulates something so crisply and clearly. You know, I remember years and years ago, someone said something like, if you want to communicate effectively, speak as if you're speaking to a sixth grader, you know, like get it to that level so it's understandable to everyone. And I just love the metaphors. We talked about it when we talked on our earlier deep dive sessions weeks back on, you know, one of the real areas of awe for the Authenticate Drive was the way they come up with, the genius, I should say, was coming up with metaphors. And I just love from a articulation point of view when they can describe something with whether it's a story or an example or some form of metaphor that just makes it crystal clear. In a relationship, I find that communication ability really powerful.
That's really true, Paul. My husband is a 7, and everything is an analogy. Everything doesn't matter how complicated the problem is or whatever we're talking about. He comes up with these analogies, and he just gets so excited talking about it, and it just is what it is. And to Brenda's point, that can hurt sometimes, yes, because it's like, okay, let's stop going around, you know, this is the truth, this is reality. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a bit harsh, but if you are aware of that's how they communicate, I think it makes it easier to understand their perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Amanda. What about from you authenticators? What is it you see that you bring? Like, when you think about what you're most proud of bringing to a relationship, what do you put your stakes on? What do you feel are your greatest strengths that you're really confident and proud about?
My word is my bond. When I say I'm going to do something, I follow through.
That's really good. Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, I think that's very true. Very true. If they make a promise, and especially if they use that word, it's game over. That's very true. The integrity of that drive is powerful.
I'm wondering, Paul, if that's from the Authenticate Drive, because I am a 5, but I can guarantee you I'm the same way as Brenda. If I tell you something's going to be done, you know, period, it is done.
It gets done. Well, in your case, Judy, being a strong completer, it could be that because on your mind, you started it by making the promise, so you're going to follow through and finish it. It might, excuse me, it might have a subtle nuance to it, which is that it might not get done literally the way you said it was going to get done, whereas for an authenticator, there'd be more of a literalness about what they've promised. So it could be as simple as I say, if, you know, as an authenticator, if they say they're going to get it done, they personally will get it done, whereas in your case, you might be that you arrange for it to get done. It could be as simple as that sort of a nuance. It still gets done. But the authenticator would be more literal.
Yeah, Paul, it's the people always try and figure us out. Yeah, I got to get to know this person, see what's underneath there. You don't have to figure us out. What you see is what you get. It's actually pretty easy.
That's good. Thanks, Peter. I just saw in the chat there, I missed who it was, but practical wisdom as one of the things that they're really proud of. And I think that's true. I can see that too. The practicality or pragmatism, as often people say, is definitely a hallmark of that drive.
That was Leonie.
Yeah, it was Leonie, yeah. I'm having trouble coming up with what I'm proud about with this because I know both sides of it. And I have to be honest. It's like, yeah, we do that, but oh, geez, timing and patience and so quick to the point. And as Brenda was saying, no one asked you, you know. It's like, so that's why I'm so silent. I go, yeah, we do all that, but anyway, what the cost? That's
good, Greg. That's good.
And this is Freddie. Just another aspect for me. I'm an 8 and my partner's a 3 in Authenticate. And we've been together 40 years. And we've known our ID for about 7, and it's been very helpful. And the thing that stands out for me is I very quickly sort. I mean, I almost don't think about it, but I'm constantly thinking, if I'm going to put my time here, is it useful? Who's going to benefit? Is there a positive result? And I do it so quickly, where he'll be, you know, in this, oh, I'm not sure if we should do this, or what about this, and what about that? And he'll put something out. And he's actually said that he appreciates that I'm so quick to go, nah, don't want to spend my time on that. Or, yeah, that sounds great, let's go with it. But I do it so quickly, and that's what I've heard from Douglas, is something he really appreciates.
That's really good. Thanks for sharing that, Freddie. It's really good. Let's talk about the avoid authenticate drive, folks. What do you see in the avoid authenticate drive? If you're an avoid authenticator, as I am, you know, what are we most proud of? And for those of you who look from the other side, what is it that you most are in awe of that drive?
Yes, I find, Paul, the avoid authenticator, that incredible ability to read the hidden message. You know, coming from an authenticator, you know, we cruise along the surface and that's about as far as we get. But that avoid authenticate, the hidden message is massive, you know, and it's just non-existent in my world anyway. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, I'd like to chip in there. That to me is one of the gifts, is not just a hidden message, other messages, the other wings, other options, what else I could have said or what else we could have done, impacts it's having on others. This has helped soften the bluntness of my 8, I think, by going, I could have just waited 2 seconds and asked the question rather than tell them that's it, you know. So I think you guys don't always get through, but it's like, oh yeah, there was another way to do that. So.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, that's true. I don't think we see it as hidden messages. We just see it as there is more than what was, you know, expressed literally or verbally. You know, we pick up on the look that someone gave, or the look they didn't give. You know, the fact they didn't attend a meeting. I remember saying to someone before, you know, this is years ago, and they said, well, if there's friction with me, I just won't turn up. And I said, well, if you don't turn up, that's still friction. You know, like the fact you're not in the room, your absence speaks volumes as well as what happened when you are in there speaking volumes. So, you know, it's really picking up on all of the things that happen beneath the surface or around the expressed message that is more obvious, I think, to the avoid authenticators.
Scale again. It's also sometimes the use of a word. I know when Jeff and I are often talking and he says something and he means something, and I use the same word and I mean something different, and it has all these shades of meaning for me. Whereas for an authenticator, a word is a word and that is what it means. And it's really sometimes puzzling. I don't know if you find that, Paul, but it's, you know, and a word, and I mean, I once had a discussion with Jeff, and you're all going to burst out laughing. He said no is a negative word, and I said not necessarily. And to me, it's not necessarily. You can say no in a way that's not negative. But for an authenticator, that is just, I'm nuts. But yes, yeah. So it is, it's just so interesting. And simple words like no. You know, yes is, well, I'm always positive, so yeah, everything is positive, but, you know, it's, yeah, it's interesting.
Thanks, Carl.
I was just going to say to that point, Paul, I think it's tone of voice is huge for us, avoid authenticate. The way you say something, it's the tone. You could say exactly the same thing, but in a different tone, and we'd interpret it differently. Depending on, I know like my daughter yesterday asked, I said, you're okay. And if the way she said it, I knew she wasn't. Whereas, you know, but it's the same words, no, I'm fine. I'm like, no, really, what's going on? And you dig a bit deep and then you know, as opposed to, no, I'm fine. You know, there's a subtlety, there's a nuance there that you just pick up on automatically. And I think it might even go a bit to Gail's point, how you say no, it's how we interpret it.
That's really good clarity, Ian. Thank you.
Paul, one thing that I've learned about my relationship with my husband, he's a 7 in Authenticate. I'm a 4. I think I'm being very obvious about what I'm asking. What I've learned about myself is I tend to just drop breadcrumbs that are supposed to be hints of what I'm asking him to do or what I'm suggesting. I'm not as a direct communicator as he is. And so in the past, before I understood this, it was frustrating. Like, why don't you get what I'm asking for? Because I think I'm being very obvious. And he's like, you didn't ask me to do anything. Just ask me for what you want me to do. And I just think, well, I thought I did. But really, it's like, how come you didn't pick up on the clue I just dropped?
That's right. That's right. That's good, Pam. Well, and I'd say that the flip side of that is one of the other elements of the, what the awesome side of the avoid, authenticate, drive is that you do pick up on all those clues, and it's not that people are leaving you clues. Like an authenticator doesn't say, well, I'll drop this clue. But to Ian's point, when someone says, no, I'm fine, I mean, it's not that an authenticator would say that if they're not, but for other people around, even other avoid authenticators, you pick up on their feelings or all those subtle vibe areas. And I'd say for myself in a relationship, one of the things that I feel good about in what I bring is that it comes across like you really care about their feelings, and it's not even that you care as much as you notice, and you rather pay attention to the feelings and deal with them than anything else, So it's, yes, obviously if you like and or love the person, you care about them anyway, but it's that you pick up on those vibes and you can't ignore them, So if I detect a tone, like Ian said before about a tone of voice, if I detect a tone about somebody, and particularly if I think it's to do with our relationship, I mean, I almost am paralyzed until we deal with that. And so having the deep and meaningful conversations is, my immediate go-to. And again, it's another thing I find myself very automatically in with people. They can answer a question, like it could be as simple as, how was your weekend? And the way they pause to answer or the words they use to answer are almost an immediate trigger for me to go into a deep and meaningful conversation, because I detected something that they're not happy about or they're not comfortable with. And as I say, especially if it's to do with our relationship, then it's like the agenda goes out the window and we deal with the feelings. It's not, it's because it's so, that's the world that we live in. The feelings and nuances is the world of the avoid authenticates.
I was just going to share one thing. Sorry. I find myself surrounded mostly by Use Authenticate at home and at work. I find like most of my coworkers and peers tend to be Use Authenticate, but one of the things that I find, the few Avoid Authenticate that I've had the opportunity to work with and spend time with, is like they really find that the intention of like, how did we get to what is today, and kind of seeing maybe the underlying causes that is not as obvious to people, and what that impact, how to maybe move forward, like this is what caused us to be here, and how can we start to move forward from that. I think that's something that really helps, just understanding, okay, it's obviously we're going through the pandemic and we're all stuck at home, but they also read into some things that are not as obvious that could be causing issues or trouble or stress.
Yes. Thanks, Vanessa.
So what I was going to add to that is that Use Authenticate really wants to see work made visible, and they do what they can do to help you and add value. And so what I've learned too is to recognize when my husband has done something, whether it's plant something in the garden, pick up something, think just that acknowledgement of, wow, you did that. I really appreciate that. I see that. It means something to them when you notice what they've done.
Paul,
this is for the authenticators.
Yeah.
Go, Greg.
There's a thing that happens with me with authenticators, though, that because they're supposed to be picking up the unsaid and sensitive to my feelings or others and so forth, when I get a sense that they haven't got that and like missed it or ignored it, it stings a little even more because they're supposed to have X-ray vision and they don't see my bones broken. And it's like, oh, so it feels like a slap rather than just normal, no one picked it. I think I set Void Authenticates up like, I thought you were supposed to pick up shit. You know?
So I'm just going to freeze this moment for a second and call that. You just saw a great example of a metaphor that when we talk about the talent of authenticators as a metaphor, like to me, that made it crystal clear when Greg said, you know, you guys are the Void Authenticates, the ones who are meant to have X-ray vision. I mean, I've got a broken bone and you don't see it. I mean, what a brilliant metaphor to use to just articulate that difference. I mean, that's what we mean when we talk about them coming up with metaphors, because I thought that was excellent, Greg. Thank you.
Hey, get back to the point, dude.
I tried.
I love you, Paul.
But that is a really good point that you're making, though, about, you know, for those of us who are Void Authenticates, it sets up almost an expectation that when people know about the ID language and they know that we should be the ones reading into that, you know, that something's going on for you and we don't pick that up. That's like, you know, that's like a double bad.
I was just thinking, for continuing that analogy, it's like we're looking at Greg going, oh, I think you might have this type of disease. And Greg's going, but I've got a broken arm. You know, like, how are you missing it? We're looking for the deeper level and really going into, so there's got to be maybe a psychological problem here. You go, no, my arm's broken, you know. It's like, come on, what are you missing?
Something must have caused that broken arm.
Yeah, that's right. What's behind that broken arm, Greg? There's something else behind it.
So how do we deal with that? That's a really good point. I mean, if there is that, because what you're saying, Greg, is that it does matter to the authenticators that we pick up on their feelings, or does it not so much? It's just something else.
I think I notice it happening when I may not be able to grasp what's bugging me, but something's bugging me, and I'm kind of saying, hey, dude, can you use your superpower now? And I think maybe what has to happen is, this sounds crazy, but we need to speak up in those moments when we're thinking. Because, see, we sometimes censor ourselves because we don't want to overdo and we don't want to take over or we don't want to be the loud one. And I think in those situations, we're hoping someone gets us. And when they don't, we go, uh-oh, back to the fog bullhorn then.
Right.
This is some deep shit. I mean, this is like really, it goes in deep. Yeah.
It's good. Someone else was going to share something here before.
That was me, Gail. I was going to say, in our house, Jeff does the cooking. And often I'm busy doing something, and if he makes a beautiful meal and I compliment him, but sometimes he'll get something out the freezer, and then he'll say, oh, wasn't that any good? Because I don't say how good it is, and yet it was already made before it came out the freezer. But he needs that validation, even if I can see others nodding, even if he's just heated something up, and I don't always remember that. So it's just, you know, that validation is so necessary, and it's so easy when you're authenticate to actually forget. I have to remember to do that because it's not my nature to do it all the time. My nature is to do it when it's special, but when it's every time, I do forget. So it's quite an effort to remember, and I see others shaking their heads, so I know that they have been in that situation too.
Thanks, Carl. And some other drives can factor in here too. I mean, we're our whole ID, not just one drive. So that could also be Jeff's verified drive, for example, needing that reassurance, maybe someone might be listening to this as an avoid verify, who's an authenticator, thinking, okay, I don't need that so often. So it could be that comes from the verified drive. It could also be the authenticate drive. It just depends on the nuances for that person. Nothing else for the avoid authenticate drive, I should say. So let's move on to the complete drive. Let's talk about, for those let's start with the use complete drive. What is it that we most admire and see as, are in awe of for the people who are completers? And I'd like the completers to think about what do you think is special? Maybe we might start there actually, because I think it might be good to hear, what do you think that you bring that's special? And then it'd be good to hear from those of us who aren't completers, okay, do we see that, or do we see something else as well that might be really good for you to hear from us as to what we are in awe of for the completers? So for the completers, what do you see you bring that you're most proud of to a relationship?
I feel that, and during this time that we've been doing these webinars, I've been doing a lot more deeper thinking about this, but the nuances that I have noticed it's about myself is not just completing things, it's also following through, like calling people back. And there are many people that I'm in touch with who I either leave them a message and they don't call me back, or something like that, and I'm a follow through person. You can depend on me, and I appreciate that about myself.
That's good. Thanks, Judy. I'm glad you shared that.
This is Brenda. When I am working on any projects, I'll be the person that looks at it beginning to end thoroughly, because we have so many projects always going. If I don't think we can complete it, or I don't think we can keep the project on target, I won't submit my buy-in. And sometimes that frustrates people because they don't understand, because I haven't articulated all the 1,000 reasons, because really, it just can't be done. We have too many competing projects. It's like, okay, I just look at them and go, no, not going to happen. But people don't appreciate the fact that, okay, wait a minute, I have to slow it down, put it in a pretty bow, and then, okay, these are all the reasons, So some people like it, some people don't. But I won't commit to anything without having a full understanding of what the full picture is, and then getting it done.
Thanks, Brenda. Who else as a completer can share and help us understand what do you see you really bring that's special to a relationship? I'd say for me, I'll contribute on what I see then as some things that I'm in awe of for anyone who's a completer. I call them the big little things. All these, when you just call out the littlest of things that have happened in the past, or what could be as simple as what someone wore last time, or what they gave you as a gift, from a couple of years ago, and, just point out to use it or comment on it, or just they pay attention to the history of things. All of those little things in the overall continuum of life, just honor tradition, honor depth. I'm more in the moment. So when someone brings that perspective of remember back when, and they'll just do it by reminding me of the littlest of things of, remember we were there together, you know? It's like, oh, that's right. And once I'm reminded, it all comes back, but it doesn't come as automatically. And I find that sense of connection to all the special things from the past, and equally you could apply that to the future as well. That would be one of the things that to me stands out immediately for the completers in my life, that are, you know, I really value and am awe of, that they just do that so without thinking. It's just instantaneous, you know, or instinctive is obviously the correct word. What do others see?
I was just going to say, since they're not speaking up, I live with a completer and a daughter is a completer as well. And there's this thoroughness, that not thoroughness of completion, but thoroughness of everything involved. It's related to what you just said, Paul. And there's a tendency to remind me of more connections than I might be seeing. And
right.
But more than that, with Vera particularly, well, actually my daughter as well, they care. They care that that's not right or that person's not in, and it hurts them that they're not right and they're not in. And it's like, I just got, God, I wish I was a nice person like you are. Like, it's like, it's complete in so many ways. The word is perfect. And I'm in awe in how they tuck in things. And I have to remember that when it's not, it hurts them more than me, or it bothers them more than me. And because they're tucking in so much more.
Totally. The word that came up as you were saying that, Greg, was inclusion as well. The way they include everybody, you know. If anyone, I'm just thinking, if we were in a room and a group of people, and there was someone sitting on their own, or there was something different about somebody, they just very subtly, very naturally, and it's just instinctive, find a way to get that person included, whether it's in a conversation, whether it's going over and spending time with them, but there's something about their ability to include that is really beautiful in a relationship. Make the person feel somewhat normal, you know, and on the same as everyone else. I think that's fitting in to whatever the situation is at the time. It's very significant.
Hi guys, I guess I wasn't speaking up because I'm still learning all the IDs, and I'm still reading a lot of material and participating on these webinars, and I guess it's so natural for me to be a completer that I can't really see, so I'm actually enjoying seeing what everyone's saying, but I can't point that. You know, it's so natural for me. It's just what I do, and I've never heard from the way you guys are saying the things you appreciate that people were driven to complete you, and now I'm listening, going, oh yeah, I think I actually do that. So yeah, that's why I'm not really speaking out, but thanks for everyone's feedback.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Hey guys, I've realized that apparently my laptop's a minute or two behind everybody else's, so I didn't realize that we were just going over time already. And out of respect for people's time, I will bring our meeting to a close. But this has been really, I find these examples and stories and metaphors, I think for all of us, all of the black belts on the call, and especially myself, you add so much richness with what you share. So please don't hold back, whether you're new or really experienced. The experienced people bring some wonderful, you know, refinements, but those of you who are new bring your innocence, and your stories really do make it much more real for all of us. So thank you for what you've shared on the call today. And I do hope that as you take the learnings for yourself and what you share with others, it does help you stay more in stride. And when you look back over the last several weeks and months, you can look at it and say, yeah, I am not only living more in stride and more fulfilled, but you are having a more positive influence on the people around you, which was the whole purpose for us all being here in the first place. So thanks for being here today. We'll pick up and continue the discussion in our call next week. But meanwhile, have a great day, rest of day and the rest of the week, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Paul.
Enjoy
Bye.
your holiday.
Thank you.